What's up guys, Philip here, and I am back in the garage. Wanted to produce a quick, hopefully interesting case study for y'all based on the deadlift and two different lifters that have very different strengths and weaknesses and a very different pull as a result. So those two lifters would be myself and my guy Richard Canfield, also known as Cephist, record holder power lifter, savage squatter, and now pretty formidable deadlifter. We are built very, very differently. We have different leverages, but he has really improved his deadlift through a means that I really, really believe in, that I really preach. That will be revealed soon, but it will not be a surprise to y'all who have followed me for quite a while now. Now, I have actually been focusing on my squat quite a bit more, and it has also yielded results for my deadlift, but for a different reason, because it is working my weakness in the deadlift as opposed to his weakness that he is using other means to work on. So first of all, with the deadlift, it's basically going to use every muscle in your body. It is incredibly taxing, and I like to break it up into two different phases, kind of below the knee and above the knee. Whereas below the knee, it's going to be a lot of leg drive. You're going to create as much tightness as you can through the pull, and you are going to try to drive the ground away from you. You're going to try to really push that ground away from you and break the bar off the ground once you've wedged yourself kind of between the bar and the ground, if you will. Now, as the bar gets to moving, it breaks the ground, it continues upward. Once it passes your knee and you lock your legs out for the most part, it's gonna be really up to your posterior chain, your erectors, spinal erectors that is, and pretty much your whole back to finish that lockout phase. So mainly quads and obviously your back under the knee to drive the ground away and really, produce that leg drive. But once you get it to your knees and past your knees specifically, and your legs are a little bit straighter, you're really going to be using your hamstrings, your posterior chain, your spinal erectors, and your whole back to complete that lift, roll those shoulders back for a good lift. So me and Richard, very, very, very different leverages. We have different strengths, but first, before we talk about that, I just want to show a quick clip from Alexander Bromley. Love Bromley, and he talks in this clip about the different leverages for a lifter, what it means for your deadlift, specifically your torso length. So let's watch that really quickly.
You get a handle on how the demands of deadlifting changes from lifter to lifter. When you talk about a pivot point and a lever, the further a load is across that lever away from the pivot point, the more work has to be done in order to move the same load the same distance. So imagine a fishing pole. For each increment of distance that you increase that pole by, it takes a smaller and smaller fish to put the same amount of stress on the fisherman. If you have a load that is farther in front of you, it is harder to move and it is harder to support. So if you consider that the back, the spine, is a rod like that, it's like the fishing pole, then you understand that the longer the spine is, the more work those muscles around the spine have to do. Also, it takes a lot more work from the glutes and the hamstrings in order to move, in order to lever that spine up.
Longer torso, not always the best for deadlift. I know my guy Bromley, who is built like a dachshund puppy, has talked in the past about how he has a natural propensity towards the squat and is not so great on the deadlift. And I've noticed a similar trend. Now, my guy Richard is not built like a dachshund per se, but he does have a longer torso in relation to his legs. So I went ahead and made super scientific diagrams to kind of measure the distances based on just my photo editor for the torso length, the femur length, the tibia length, and the arm length. So with Richard, what he has here is he has a torso length, and again, these are relative. We're looking at ratios, not the actual number on here, because these pictures are different and they are different sizes. But on this picture, he has a torso length of 98 is what I measured, with a femur length of 92 and a tibia length of 82. So his torso is actually longer relatively than his femurs, which is basically going to mean that he's going to have to be more upright because he has shorter femurs. His knees are going to be less further out and his hips are going to be less further back. I really butchered that. Not a wordsmith. But his longer torso is going to be more upright relatively with those shorter femurs. And you see that in his squat. He is a nasty squatter, recently squatted a state record 650 pounds, and he has a very upright style in his squat. And he has very strong legs because he has to squat with more of an upright posture, but it's not going to help him much on his deadlift. And you see that where when he gets past his knees, he has trouble locking a weight out, and that is due to his longer torso having to basically put more of the load on his back and his back muscles to lock himself out with that torso length. And that's, again, what you see. You see a very strong, relatively upright squatter with a hard time locking the weight out due to that short torso, or long torso rather, and short femurs. Now, it is important to mention that Richard also doesn't have the longest arms. He doesn't have super short arms, but if you look at this diagram, once he locks the bar out, the bar is significantly higher than his knees. And when you see somebody with longer arms, that bar will be closer to their knees, and that signifies more of an advantage on the deadlift. So with that being said, how do my leverages differ? They're much different. Whereas Richard is about 5'11", 228 pounds right now, I am 6'3", a little bit on the husky side right now at 265, and my limb ratios are much different. Whereas Richard had a longer torso relative to his femurs, I have longer femurs relative to my torso with my super specific, super scientific diagramming. What I came up with is a torso length of about 64 and a femur length of about 75 with a tibia length of about 56. So again, numbers not very important, but the ratio is important. And what you see there is my femurs are longer than my torso. And that makes perfect sense, because if you think of me as a squatter, I have a lot of trouble with it. It is not a natural movement. The longer femurs mean my hips are either going to be further back or my knees are going to be further forward. And like Bromley talked about in one of his videos as well, based on squat leverages, if either of those is significantly further out from the midline, you're going to have to produce a lot more force for movement in that joint. So if my knees are forward like they are pretty often, my quads are going to have to be very strong to drive out of the hole, and that's accurate, and that is indicated by watching me squat, where I typically try to lean into my posterior chain because I don't have weak quads per se, but my long femurs make it to where I have to produce a lot of force relatively to have the same movement. Again, the short torso relative to my long femurs are also going to mean that I have to bend over a lot when I squat, and that is something that you see as well. That's something that's going to put more pressure on the spinal erectors and my back in general. And that's also going to contribute to that good morning squat that I am fighting so hard to eliminate. So not the best squatter, and that makes sense based on the limb ratios and torso to femur and all of that good jazz. So with that being said, I am not very disadvantaged in the deadlift once I can break the bar off of the ground. Now with my longer legs relative to my torso, it makes it a little bit of a challenge driving the bar off of the ground. I don't have as much leg drive, but once I kind of get it above my knees, my shorter torso means that my back has to do less work to lock the same weight out relative to Richard's. So we have opposite strengths. That is shown in our opposite strengths, mine being towards the deadlift, his being towards the squat. So guys, if you're still following along and you're interested in this, I hope that you are as fascinated by that as me. So I went ahead and looked at our 2 deadlifts again. You will see before he started working on his weaknesses, you can really see where he struggles. So I'm looking before he started working on this weakness at a 550 pound pull. You'll see that he is relatively upright in the bottom of the pull when he gets ready to pull the bar off the ground, but you'll see his back unpacks immediately. And that's because of the torso length. I would also venture to guess he could cue back tightness a little bit better, but you'll see once he starts the pull, that back tightness and that back rigidity, it just says sayonara. And it turns into a kind of humpback deadlift, and that's going to make it even harder once you get it past the knees to lock it out as well. If you've ever gotten a deadlift past your knees and your back is super rounded, it makes it so much harder to lock it out, because not only are you going to have to fight towards the top, but you're going to have to roll your shoulders back with 600 pounds. So it's going to make it increasingly harder. So we see this played out in his deadlift, this 550 pounds, which again is child's play compared to his squat. It turns out to be incredibly hard for him, especially once he gets it past his knees with that kind of curled back. And so the lockout is really, really tough for him. Now, what has he been doing to fix that? He has been doing a lot of pull-ups to work those lats and a lot of back work in general to increase his back strength and be able to stay in a better position throughout the pull. If again you followed me, you know I talk about pull-ups and how important they are. And in a deadlift, they are going to help you stay tight. They're going to help you keep the bar closer to your midline so that it doesn't drift out in front of you, making it even harder. And they are a huge asset in a deadlift. So whole back, getting it stronger. He's made significant progress in his back strength, especially his pull-ups, and he has gone from a struggly 550 while he was 550 deadlift, while he was still high barring 605 on squat, to a 600 pound deadlift, and he is still climbing, guys. Super excited for him, and he is progressing with that. So if you have a longer torso and your back has more of a demand for the deadlift, you really need to make sure you have a very, very strong back to kind of fight that natural disadvantage that you might have. The good news is he has a nasty squat, and you will watch in his deadlifts, he blows bars off the ground. I mean, the leg drive phase is no problem. It's once it gets past the knee that he starts running into some issues. So with me and my leverages, again, the opposite. I have trouble breaking the bar off the ground sometimes. It doesn't move very fast off the ground, but once it gets off of the ground, especially past my knees and especially kind of in the mid-range, right below my knee and right above my knee, I am able to accelerate the bar much faster than he is and finish the pull with more momentum at that point. And that's because I have a shorter torso. My back doesn't have to work quite as hard as his relatively with the same amount of weight once I get it to that point. Now with my long legs, I don't create as much force off of the ground. So that's the trade-off. That's the interesting part. And my deadlift weakness, again, off the ground, that leg drive, I've really been working as a byproduct through increasing my squat. My squat is not where I want it to be, but I've been working on it very hard and made significant progress with it. And I've seen that translate over to my deadlift being stronger off the ground, and in turn allowing me to handle heavier and heavier weights up to 650 pounds here recently, and that is climbing. 7 plates is not safe. But that has really helped me. So it's actually my leg strength that has increased my squat and also increased my deadlift through addressing that weakness of leg drive off of the ground. So I wanted to take a quick look at both of our top deadlifts. I went ahead and took 600, which is what Richard has done. That's his best so far. And that was on a deadlift bar with no straps. So I wanted to compare it to a pull that I deemed to be pretty similar, the most similar pull I could find, which was a 615 pound pull that I didn't use straps for. So I'm just trying to find that video. And here we are. So watching this video again, I have 615 pounds on the bar. He has 600 pounds on the bar. These are with deadlift bars, and this is without straps and hook grip as well, it looks like. So pretty similar scenarios. And you see, he actually sits down and composes himself before the pull, whereas I am more of a get tight all throughout my back and then through my hamstrings, and then sit into the bar, create as much tightness in that wedge, and then fire off. So watching this, we pull at the same time, and you'll notice that he gets to his knees before I really get the bar off the ground good. And so that is very apparent. He accelerates very fast from the beginning. That leg drive part is no issue. But again, you will notice that his back tightness is compromised almost immediately. He rounds his back immediately, which is not the worst thing to have a little upper back rounding in your deadlift. A lot of top deadlifters do it strategically to have their arms hang down lower. But you can see once it gets past the knees with him, he has trouble with the lockout because it is, a rounded back and his natural disadvantage of locking it out with his longer torso, which gives me time to catch up to him once I get the bar moving, and I shoot past him with my short little torso, strong back, and lockout strength. Again, I am naturally, or not naturally, but I've worked my back a lot in my lifetime, and it is very, very strong. So once I break the bar off the ground, I catch up to him pretty quickly and overtake him on this deadlift, and then actually lock out a little bit before him. So you can see two very different deadlifts and two very different strengths, his being off the floor and mine being that mid-range, which kind of leads to two very different deadlifts. Again, I will also mention that I keep back rigidity pretty well the entire pull, again through that back tightness and back strength and really lesser demand on my back. So leg drive, Team Richard all the way. He blasts it off the ground. Now once I get the bar off the ground, I accelerate past him pretty quickly once he hits that sticking point kind of right around his knees where he has to lock it out with that rounded back and longer torso. So just decided I would do a little bit of a film study on this one. I hope you guys found this as interesting as I do. If you didn't, then this probably was a pretty boring video, but fascinating stuff to me, guys, and always very interesting to see different lifters and why they are naturally inclined to different things based on genetics and training background. So again, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope it was informative, and hopefully you found something that might help you with your own deadlift based on your own body type. I appreciate y'all. If you have any questions for me, drop them down in the comment section below. Again, I am not an exercise physiologist, kinesiologist, or all that. I'm just a bro who's done this quite a while, deadlifted 650, and really enjoy studying this stuff. So hope y'all enjoyed this one. Drop a comment down in the comment section below. Appreciate y'all as always, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.